Shalom. Before I get started with this lesson, I want to give all honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Racha HaKodash. Double honors to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone that taught me this truth and that rule well. Peace and salutation to the elect that's out here laboring in all truth and sincerity. To you I say Shalom. This is the brother Amon Ariyah from the GMS Charlotte camp, coming back with another Lord willing edifying lesson to feed the elect of the nation of Israel. And this lesson I wanted to go into, the other day, for those of you, that weren't made aware, Jesse Jackson, passed away. Pretty much, with this whole situation with dealing with him, I've been seeing on social media, it was a lot of Jake, that was speaking on his death and wanting to put to rest this term African American, which if you are new to this Hebrew Israelite ministry, you know that we do not call ourselves Black, African American, or any of that, because we are not first and foremost, we are not African Americans, because African American is a oxymoron, all right, created from two, Edomite, constructs. Okay, African, goes back to Leo Scipio Africanus, and American goes back to Amerigo Vespucci. So of course, one of the first strongholds that we break, in this truth, all right, is knowing your true nationality, which, all right, if you are a so-called Negro, or what they will call Black or so-called Native American, all right, you will be from the tribe of Judah. All right, there's no such thing as Black or African American. Okay, and as the scripture tells us, all right, real quick, this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17 and verse 4. It says, "And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever." Okay, and that has happened to us. All right, when you go into our history, all right, because when you go into the history dealing with 70 A.D., which was around the time when the Israelites were exiled from the Jerusalem, all right, due to Roman persecution, all right, a good portion of the Israelites fled into the western part and the northern parts of Africa, all right, but that does not make us Africans, because according to the book of Galatians, let me pull this up real quick. I believe it's 7 and 14, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's not it. I know it's in the book of Galatians. Give me 1 second, Salakia. Galatians 4 and 26. It says, "But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all." All right. Matter of fact, let me actually pull this up. All right. We constantly go into the scholarship dealing with the history. So I'm gonna get this from the book From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph R. Windsor. And on page 84, it goes into, in the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. The point: during the period from Pompey to Julius, it was estimated that over a million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing Roman persecution and slavery. All right, and like I said, we mainly fled in uh, the western and northern parts of Africa. All right, and that's why you have a lot of Jake that come from continents such as or continent countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, you know Congo, just to give an example. All right, and a good chunk of those Israelites over there, a good chunk of those people over there are Israelites. But like I said, as a whole, we come from Jerusalem. All right, so we are not Africans, man. All right, the scriptures literally, put a difference. All right, let's get that real quick. All right, this is 11, Exodus chapter 11 and verse 7. It says, "But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doeth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel." Because the so-called Africans, they go back to the seed of Ham. All right, because all people descend from three people. All right, you have the three sons of Noah, which is Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All right, and let me get this, as well. In the Zondervan Compact Dictionary, all right, we're gonna go to, and Salakia for not having these things on the screen, but the screen recorder is easier. All right, so like I said, if you have these books, you can pull them up. If I can put them in post productions, I'll try to do that. But the point is this. All right, this is Ham in the Zondervan Bible Compact Dictionary. It says the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. All right, so these are Edomite scholars, all right, who did the research, and they understand that the so-called black race, all right, we are not the same as the Africans in that continent. And like I said, your nationality is not determined by the continent that you live on. All right, that's one of the strongholds that we tear down according to Second Corinthians, the 10th chapter. All right, which matter of fact, let me grab that as well. Basic milk lesson, but I thought this topic was heavy. All right, this is Second Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 4, and I'm gonna read this in the NLT. It says, "We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments." And one of the arguments that has been, put upon our people is that the so-called black people in America, go back to Africans. Okay, that is not the case, as we just proved. Okay, it says we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Hamashiach. All right, so I'll read it actually the correct way. It says we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing Yahweh. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Hamashiach Yahushua, because the whole point of this ministry is to teach our people, all right, to number one, return to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua and teach them to correctly serve and worship our true power. Okay, because one thing, that is talked about, all right, amongst our people, all right, is who was the God that we worship before slavery, all right, because our people didn't start, claiming the things that we see now of worshiping a white Jesus, all right, calling ourselves these different proverbs and bywords, until we were brought over here, by the Edomites, and stripped of our identity and given us a pseudo identity. And as you see in this picture right here, all right, our identity has changed over the course of time. All right, we went from a slave to a Negro to black to colored to Afro American to African American minority. All right, but we truly, our true nationality is, being a Hebrew Israelite from whatever perspective tribe that you descend from. All right, whether you're from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, all right, all the way down to the Northern Kingdom tribes such as Gad, Reuben, Issachar, Naphtali, and so on. You know, so bringing all this back, with the death of Jesse Jackson, you having a lot of our people, wanting to put to rest this term African American, all right, which, like I said, is an oxymoron because that name, if you claiming that is pretty much referring to you calling yourself after two Edomites, all right. Now I wanted to play a few videos that I thought was heavy dealing with this topic, so let's start with this one.
I have mixed feelings about the passing of Jesse Jackson. I somehow, maybe I'm wrong, and God give me grace if I am, feel like he had something to do with the unaliving of Martin Luther King Jr. He was also a very jealous man of ethnic Black Americans and anybody who was melanated that was successful. However, I do know that his organizations have done a lot of great work in Chicago and beyond, so I have to give him respect for that. But rest in peace to Jesse Jackson, and with his passing, we are also saying it's the end of the age of the African American term. We are putting to rest an old era of people that have pushed us very, very far in this country, and I salute them. I salute them. My parents, my grandparents, my elders. But it's time for the new and the evolution of the new term, which is foundational, Sulan, ethnic, indigenous, Black American.
Which that is bugged out as well as incorrect. Okay, because that's the new thing that Jake is trying to cling to is being a what they call FBA or foundational or foundation Black American or whatever the other term that she used, but that's not who you are. All right, that's just another proverb and byword that was given to you by these boule leaders to keep you from knowing who you truly are. All right, as being the sons and daughters of Israel. All right, so let's get this real quick dealing with that false covering. One second. All right, this is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 37. It says, "And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whether the Lord shall lead thee." All right, and that's what has happened. All right, we became a proverb and a byword, which is pretty much these pseudo names and coverings, these pseudo identities that was given unto us, not realizing, all right, your true nationality as being a Hebrew Israelite from whatever perspective tribe that you descend from. All right, and those names constantly got changed throughout the process of time by the devils to keep you from knowing who you are because they've always known who we were. Hence, why I have this other picture in the screen. All right, this is one of the pictures that we bring out, from time to time, dealing when we talk about this topic of these devils knowing who we were. Okay, because when you read this, all right, this was a sign that they used when they were selling us. All right, you have the original, okay, which top one is the original, but then they changed it over time. All right, but as you read here, it says to be sold on board the ship. It says, some of it's hard to read, so bear with me. It says on Tuesday, the 6th of May, next to Abbey Ferry, a choice cargo of about 150 fine he boat. fine, healthy, fine Hebos just arrived from Windward and Rice Coast. All right, but then when you go to the edited one, they changed the word Hebos to Negroes. All right, so why did they do that? Because they know that we are the Hebrew Israelites, man. All right, and they had to, hide this because they didn't want us to be able to go into our history and connect the dots because once I'm gonna bring this out as well. Um, Dealing with the Willie Lynch letter, you know, let me get that one. All right, this is the Willie Lynch letter and the making of a slave, and I always like to bring this part back. Okay, so this is the paragraph dealing with warning possible interloping negatives. So it says, furthermore, we talked about paying particular attention to the female savage and her offspring orderly future. Saki. Furthermore, we talked about paying particular attention to the female offspring and her and Saki. Furthermore, we talked about paying particular attention to the female savage and her offspring orderly future planning. Then, more recently, we stated that by reversing the positions of the male and female savages, we created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever until this phenomenon occurred and reshifted the positions of male and female savages. Our experts warned us about the possibility of this phenomenon occurring, for they say the mind has a strong drive to correct and recorrect itself over a period of time. If it can touch substantial original historic base, and they advised us the best way to deal with this phenomenon is to shave off the brute's mental history and create a multiplicity of phenomena of illusions that each illusion will twirl in its own orbit, something similar to floating balls in a vacuum. And that's what, these proverbs and bywords were ultimately, created to do. All right, so with the creation of these different, pseudonyms that our people called ourselves, all right, that was, what they call it, uh, the orbit, how they word it, orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis because within, you know, being black Native American, Mexican, they created a pseudo culture, all right, hence black culture, Native American culture, Latino culture, and that gave life and grew legs to pretty much create a whole new realm to which our people became trapped in, and they gave us leaders that helped push that narrative to keep you from knowing who you truly was. All right, hence Jesse Jackson being one of those people. Okay, because Jesse Jackson, all right, I'm gonna put this on the screen next. All right, played a pivotal part in you know providing that false covering for our people. All right, so let's play this next one.
Since 1619 and the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in Virginia, standard terminology to describe Africans living in America was colored or Negro. For over 360 years, as blacks were relegated to second-class citizenship, terms that reinforced oppression have been used to describe them. But as centuries pass, black people have at times fought to break free from derogatory labels. After the Civil War, several black people dispensed with the names given them by their former enslavers. This would continue even into the 1900s when, during the height of the Civil Rights Movement, black leaders strongly rebelled against Jim Crow labels. But for mainstream America, a major turning point came in the late 1980s. On this day in 1988, a group of black leaders, including Reverend Jesse Jackson and representatives from the NAACP, met to discuss the National Black Agenda.
I also want to say fair use, fair use. This video is for educational purposes only. All right, I'm not using any of these videos for monetary gain. Like I said, this is just for educational purposes. So, fair use, fair use.
Here that Jackson and his peers catapulted catapulted the term African American into the country's lexicon. The term has been used since the 1970s, but never gained widespread acceptance until after this Chicago convention. Reverend Jackson said, "To be called African Americans has cultural integrity. It puts us in our proper historical context. Every ethnic group in this country has a reference to some land base, some historical cultural base. African Americans have hit that level of cultural maturity."
And that's a lie, okay? Because so-called black people, all right, our our country of reference, all right, was changed to hide where we come from, all right, because like I said, even though we were grabbed up from different parts of Africa, that does not make that continent our place of origin, okay? Because like I read earlier, we come from Jerusalem, you know, and so they're not going to allow that connection to be made in our minds, because then that would then spurn everything that they ended up doing to keep us from knowing who we were, all right? So they had to create these false leaders such as Jesse Jackson, all right, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and so on, to keep you, from looking into where you truly came from. All right, and I want to get this quick precept. This is Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 1, 23 and 1. It says, "Woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, save the Lord. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, power of Israel, against the pastors that feed my people. Ye have scattered my flock and driven them away, and has not visited them. Behold, I will lay upon you the evils of your doing, save the Lord." Right. So Yahweh Shem Shai, all right, is against these different guys. So hey, Jesse Jackson, as well as all these other leaders that you know about, and some that we're just finding out about because in looking into this this subject matter, I came to find out that Jesse Jackson wasn't the originator of the term of African American. He was, it was another Jake, which I'm gonna show in a minute, all right, who was used to try to push it first. But the first time they showed it, it didn't stick, you know. But Jesse Jackson eventually became the one that they chose to bring this confusion, and it worked this time, man. All right, so this whole thing of being labeled an African American, it landed with him, because before him, all right, our people were calling themselves colored, black, Negro. We had different ideologies of what we were calling ourselves, but the term African American didn't fully stick until Jesse Jackson said it. So continuing on.
Jackson stated that other races could connect their heritage to their mother countries with a sense of pride and acceptance. The term rose to prominence because it was considered more appropriate than black or colored. But we are now...
Yeah, and the reason they wanted that to stick, because they wanted to associate you with those Hamites over there in Africa, man, which Africa is not even the true, name of that continent, because like I said, Africa goes back to the Edomite Leo Scipio Africanus, all right, because as we know, according to the book of Psalms 49 and 11, let me get that real quick. It says, "Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names." All right. So these Edomites conquered these different lands and renamed them after themselves. All right. So to call yourself African American means that we have descendants that come from Africa. But like I said, we are not the same as the so-called Africans over there in that land. Okay. So that the country of reference, narrative that it try tie us with, that's false information. That's one of the things that the Willie Lynch letter was talking about. Creating that that orbiting cycle that will keep us spinning in its own axis. All right, to keep your mind stuck in the pit that they created for you, man. All right, and they use these different sellouts to push that narrative. All right. because that was the plan of the elites from the beginning, was to get the name of Israel out the earth. All right. This is Psalms 83:1. It says, keep not thy silence, O power, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O power. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against their hidden ones, against thy hidden ones, which the hidden ones being, all right, the Israelites, all right, because us being the true biblical Israelites that the scriptures speak about, that's the world's best kept secret, all right, and it's really a secret only to us here in America, because the other nations, they know who we are, man, all right. That's why you're seeing all these videos of these different heathen, all right, beginning to pop up, and how they're begging for the children of Israel over here in America to wake up, because they know who we are, all right, and they know that we are the true rulers of the earth. All right. Now they consulted with the Edomites to pretty much, put us in this position, but they know deep down in their spirit that we are the true rulers of this earth, and being ruled over by the Edomites. All right. That has affected everybody on the earth, even the earth itself. Everybody is feeling the strain of being ruled over by this ungodly, demonic ass devil, man. But that didn't stop them from teaming up with this devil, because when you go into dealing with this, there's many slave trades, but we're dealing with the main one, which is the transatlantic slave trade. All right, the main players in that, all right, were the small hats, the Hamites, and the Ishmaelites. All right, because we always bring that out, man. All right, the small hats, the Amalekites, they financed the slave trade. That's why when you go into the records, all right, all the boats were named, by the small hats. The traders were small hats, all right, and the slaves, they had all Hebrew names, man. You know, but going off of that, like I said, the Ishmaelites, they built the ships, and the Hamites helped round us up. That's what that narrative of they try to run with, saying that blacks sold blacks into slavery. To a degree, it was Jake that was helping Ham, but for the majority of it was Hamites that was doing the majority of the rounding up, man. So when you watch, movies like Roots, they'll try to, lump us all in the same boat, but no, it was mainly the Hamites, so-called Africans, that was rounding up, all right, Israelites. That's why, it was a video I seen recently. I forget what African tribe it was, but they were coming out and apologizing for their role and putting us in slavery. All right, because when you go into these different Hamitic countries, they don't fuck with Jake. All right, and a good example of that is whenever you saw that dude I Show Speed, he was doing a whole tour around the different countries of Africa, and when he got to like the western parts of Africa, he was embraced, because like I said, a lot of those people over there are Israelites. But then when he got to like I believe they said it was either East Africa or South Africa, I can't remember which one, but they weren't fucking with him, man, because we're not the same people. That's why I read earlier the Lord put a difference between the Egyptians and the Israelites, all right, which mainly you can apply that as the Hamites and the Israelites, because we have two different spirits, okay. But all these nations have come together under one accord to help remove the name of Israel from the earth, as I just read. Well, I'm about to read Salakia. So this is Psalm 83 and verse 4. It said, they have said, come, I'll start back at 3. It said, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederates against thee, because all these heathen remember what the history entailed about when we were in the power seat. All right, going back to King David, and eventually him passing his throne to King Solomon. King David put all the nations in subjection under him, and under King Solomon, which inherited his kingdom. Okay, the nations were tributaries under him, and we had those 40 years of peace. But like I said, to get to that point, going back to his father King David, all right, he had all the other nations are in subjection because he was a man of war. All right, he fought many battles against these different heathen nations, and so they know the records of what we used to do to them. All right, and that's why they all came under one consensus to pretty much come with it where we can't allow these people to get back to that position because we know that if that happens, we're all going back into slavery. You know, so that's why they all came together. All right, which the main head, because when you read the rest of the chapter, which I might as well go ahead and get it. All right, all the nations are in on this, man. All right, that's why nobody is innocent when we go into all right the captivity that's about to befall the heathen. All right, this is Psalm 83:6. It says, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gabal and Ammon and Amalek, and the Philistines and the inhabitants of Tyre. A sword also is joined with them, and they have hope in the children of Lot, Salah. So all the heathen have taken part in our captivity. All the heathen, all right, are complicit in the keeping us lost as a people. All right, because no one of these if these heathen are so innocent and deserve salvation like you coon Israelites out there, are trying to, put, why has none of them stepped forward to truly, help, us regain our memory of who we are, okay? Because like it says here, First Maccabees 2:10, what nation have not had part in her kingdom and gotten part of her spoils, all right? Or gotten of her spoils. All nations are complicit in the slavery of our people. All right, and like I said, they commission these different coons out here. All right, these sellouts to take part in keeping us lost as a people. Okay, so finish this out.
A growth in popularity of the term black, this time for a different reason. Following George Floyd's murder last year, the New York Times announced it would be capitalizing the B in black to describe people and cultures of African origin in the U.S. and elsewhere. This is something heavy about the word black and how we as a people were able to take something meant for our ridicule and turn it into black power. And that is for the culture. Thank you for watching.
And that's why I was saying, that's that trap that our people are trapped in, trying to find out our identity. Because like I said, this wasn't always what we were calling ourselves, man.
Remember when we became African Americans, because I worked in the black marketing department at Coca-Cola, where we were selling Coke to our people. And the vice president came in and said, okay, we are now African Americans. We were like, alrighty, African.
How you spell that again?
Right.
Is it two A's?
And I heard this white woman was sitting next to me, and she said to another white woman, they don't know who they are. Wow. That's what I said. And I'm gonna take my wig off, and I'll be honest, I did not know what to say to her. I didn't know what to say to her.
But in a way, it's kind of true, though.
That's why I didn't know what to say.
And that's exactly the point, okay? Because you running from label to label to label, all right, going from slave to Negro to black to colored, Afro-American, Asiatic black man, African American minority, all these different titles, man. They are all, a part of a social construct to keep you lost and oppressed, man. Because with these different titles, it comes different, different gods that you end up worshiping, different doctrines that you're going to find, and it's all created to keep you from knowing who you truly are. All right, this is Jeremiah chapter 2:11. It says, "Hath a nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods, but my people have changed their glory for that which doeth not profit." Right, and our people want to call themselves everything under the sun, but who they truly are, all right, which is being a Hebrew Israelite, okay? Because being a Hebrew Israelite is more than just being the title, the name. It's a legacy that comes behind it. All right, the word Hebrew, all right, it is, you know, a legacy in itself, going back to, you know, the name Eber, which is one of our ancestors. All right, but you know, that it carries a heavy, significant history. All right, when you go into our heritage, man, our legacy, our nationality, all these things, you know, are heavy. You know, when you go into our history, this is why these devils don't want you to know who you are. Okay, they want you to continue to call yourself everything but a Hebrew Israelite, man. All right, because these other constructs that you have, you know, put upon yourself, they lead to other gods, man. All right, they don't give you the full glory that the Lord gave us. For Him to call us Israelite, all right, because when you go into our forefather Jacob, when he had his name changed to Israel, all right, that wasn't just some random, you know, story that we read about. No, that was the Lord putting His name on us. Okay, because when you go into the word Israel, all right, you break it down in the Lashon Kodash, it goes back to the word Yasha Allah, which is He is a Prince of God, or He is a Prince of the power. Okay, that name comes with an extensive history that we read about as far as going into our ancestors. All right, it leads you down a long line of a great historical people. All right, names that when you go in and read about King David, King Solomon, Yahweh Shai, you know, the prophets, the major and minor prophets, just the people we read about in the scriptures, man. These are a great, you know, line of nobility. All right, they don't want you to know that you come from a nobility. This is why, like, they don't teach you anything, you know, pre-slavery. All right, because they don't want you to know that you come from nobility. All right, when you look up this word nobility, it says honor, renown, majesty, grandeur. It says quality of being excellent or rare. It says high rank, dignity, grace, great deed. It says the quality of being of noble rank or birth, social or political preeminence, usually accompanied by hereditary privilege. All right, and that is given to us by the law, statutes, commandments. All right, which, you know, ties us to the covenant that was made with our power. When you go into, you know, when Moses came down off of Mount Sinai with the tablets, and, you know, the you know, that blood was put on the post, which is the signifying of the covenant between Yahweh and the Israelites. That's our history. That's why it's important for you to know where you come from. All right, your true history, which is why we get scriptures like, you know, Job 8:8 and Jeremiah 6:16, which I'll read real quick. It says Job 8:8, for inquire I pray thee of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. All right, because when you go into the history, it's beyond Black History Month. All right, we have history that predates the shit that we did here in America. We have history that, you know, going into the Byzantine Empire, the Moors, you know, and such. Like I said, we had kingdoms in Africa. All right, you look up things like Fort Judah, Negro Land. You know, they don't want you to know things like this because they want you to stay centered on here in Babylon. That's why, you know, calling yourself black and African American, that you know, minimizes the vast history that we have as a nation. All right, which is through the spirit of our people. All right, in a way, they're you know, going in a right direction as far as trying to shed that term African American, but then they're leaving that and going to another false covering, which is that, you know, foundational Black American bullshit. When you're an Israelite, man, you can't hide from who you are. But like I said, Jesse Jackson wasn't the first individual to do that. Okay, because as we're going to show, and this video is a little lengthy, so, you know, just bear with me.
All right, so Reverend Jesse Jackson apparently was not the creator of the term African American back in 1988.
All right, and before I fully get into this, like I said, I wanted to get all the meat off the bone as far as dealing with. Like I said, you have a lot of these guys were tools that Esau used. All right, to aid in us, being kept in the dark. All right, which is when you look up, the Black Boule. Jesse Jackson was a part of it, as well as this individual that's about to be named in this video. MLK, all your so-called leaders, all the people that's heralded as icons, especially in this month. All right, in the month of February, Black History Month. All these guys were sellouts. All right, by the devil being used to keep us in the dark. So real quick, this is First Maccabees chapter 1 and 11. It says, "In those days there went out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow." And these are Jakes that pretty much couldn't see life without Edomite interference. All right, they looked at that like we needed these devils to be able to afford ourselves in society. This going all the way back during the time of the Greek Empire till today. Okay, so what we're reading, all right, is still playing out to this day. All right, it's still individuals of our people that have aligned themselves with the devil. All right, made covenants with him, and are being used as weapons against us. All right, so that term African American was nothing more than as you see on the screen, is a term of control that was help put the yokes on our necks spiritually to keep us lost. Okay.
Because apparently, in 1782, this was printed in a newspaper in Philadelphia. It says, "Two sermons written by the African American on the capture of Lord, what did I say, Cornwallis, to be sold by," these are people selling the sermons, right? You know me. I'm not putting this mess on my screen unless I already did the research. And this quote unquote African American is not a secret. Philadelphia at the time was a pretty decent sized city. However, they didn't have too many free people of color running around teaching sermons. Thus, intro Mr. Absalom Jones, another rebel, allegedly born into slavery, um, had to beg to get his wife and kid out of slavery, or borrow or take up donations, whatever the term. I believe the term they used was he took up donations to get his wife and child out of slavery. Then he did some amazing things. If you're not familiar with Absalom Jones, let me enlighten you. He is the founder of the Free African Society that was based out of Philadelphia. But not just that, he was also the co-founder of the African Episcopal Church located in Philadelphia. Oh, FYI, this is another sermon. See, the original newspaper just mentioned that somebody had written two sermons. We know for a fact that it was Absalom Jones. There was no other trusted bookmaker around at the time who was.
Now I wanted to go into this word sermon real quick. All right. So this is from the Edamon Online. It says a sermon is a discourse upon a text of scripture, that which is preached. Okay, and as here refer to these different individuals, such as this dude Absalom Jones, Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King. They called themselves reverends. All right, But when you listen to these guys, they never brought out scriptures, and you gotta ask yourself, why is that? You know, because they were tools. All right. Because why don't you look up this word reverend real quick? Let me get that as well. Reverend. This word reverend, it says worthy of deep respect, worthy to be reverend due to age, character, etc. So these guys weren't actual, you know, preachers or pastors. They were just, you know, guys that were propped up in the position to be somebody of a reputable, well, good reputation, pretty much. You know, they weren't actual, you know, Bible teachers. Okay, because a true reverend, like you hear people call themselves reverend in the church, you're supposed to be a pastor. All right, and if you calling yourself a pastor or a preacher, you're supposed to be teaching the scriptures, right? Well, according to Second Ezra 1 and 5, this is the duty of a pastor or a preacher, or what you could say a reverend. It says First Ezra 1 and 5. It says, "Go thy way and show my people their sinful deeds, and their children their wickedness, which they have done against me, that they might tell their children's children, because the sins of their fathers have increased in them, for they have forgotten me, and have offered unto strange gods." So a true reverend, all right, would be given, you know, sermons on how to truly worship Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. We will be teaching the history of the scriptures, all right, going into, you know, how to serve Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, giving the true names of our power, all right, giving the true history and context of our history, explaining who we are as being the true Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. These guys weren't doing that. As you see, it was all to push that, you know, African bullshit into our people, into our people's minds, man. All right. And so what this Jake is bringing out, dealing with this guy Absalom Jones, he was the originator of the term African American, and uh, that was the first trial of them trying to push that on our people. And like I said, he didn't. With him, it didn't stick until Jesse Jackson, you know, did it. You know, I believe they said what 1988, if I'm not mistaken. But continuing on.
To indoctrinate his people. This here is that original sermon by an African American. And then this sermon is much later, 1808. You see, after the Revolutionary
Because
War,
one more side note I want to add, you know, when you go into, you know, the chattel slavery, you know, when Esau began to teach our people the scriptures, all right, he took out, you know, all the scriptures dealing with, you know, the Exodus and, you know, us being freed from our captors, and just taught about, you know, the slavery parts of it. All right, so that's why you have things such as the slave Bible, but then they had, you know, certain Jake that they would teach up, all right, on how to, you know, teach the scriptures in their own way, all right, which is to pretty much making the slaves subservient to their master. But, you know, during that time, you would have, you know, Jake teaching the people, but then you have an Edomite in the background to make sure that dude stayed on script, because you had, you know, prior to this, individuals, mainly Nat Turner, all right, who found out through the spirit, because the Lord revealed to him through a series of visions that the people in the scripture that he was reading about were his people. They were. He found that he was a Hebrew Israelite, which led to him leading those many slave revolts that he did against the Edomites. You know, but like I said, this was, you know, all prior to this, and then after Nat Turner, this is why they had, you know, to pretty much, you know, make it to where the slave that taught the Bible after that, they had a strict curriculum of what they wanted them to know, as far as, you know, servants be, you know, subjective to your master, and, you know, things like that. So that's, you know, a little side note I wanted to add to that as well. So let's continue on.
There's a free people of color running around. Apparently, they started to migrate up towards Pennsylvania into Philadelphia, and this scared the shit out of people, rightly so. Um, so what ended up happening? Some group of people devised a plan to. They needed some form of structure for these colored people, and that structure comes in no other form than you goddamn guessed it, white Jesus, with your Rev, Absalom Jones.
And what he just said was what I was going into earlier, as far as our people, changing their gods. Because when you putting on these different names, it comes with different gods, man. And we know that all the coverings since being a slave up until the truth, it made our people subservient to the Edomites, and we had to accept their God, which is Cesare Borgia, or who they call, so-called Jesus Christ, man. All right, white Jesus. All right, we call him Seji here in Charlotte, but that's a whole different covering than what our people are supposed to have, man. All right.
Mind you, like I said before, Absalom Jones is actually from Delaware. He's not African. No record of anything to do with his parents, but highly doubt that they were African either. I did find something interesting though. That original guy that the sermon was actually written about, his name was Charles Cornwallis the First. That's Marcus, whatever. This one right here is his son. But the weird thing, real odd coinky dink, is that's his mama, Jemima Tullikins Jones. Mr. Absalom took the surname Jones as an indication of his American identity.
Our people putting on that false covering, okay? Because here it is, on one hand, he's trying to push forward that we are so-called Africans, and like the Jake exposed, the dude has no ties from Africa. All right, his people descended from Delaware. He was a slave, okay, and so here it is, him trying to seek help from the Edomites. He adopted the last name Jones. All right, trying to integrate his so-called American heritage. All right, by him paying tribute to I guess the Edomites that he was trying to suck up to. In so many words. All right.
Interesting. Also, very interesting to note, this person was already in Pennsylvania. In 1784, however, he was allegedly manumitted. He already had a job, and he was going to be better at inducting you into your position. It was not.
So, just looking up that word manumitted. All right, the word manumit. It says to set a slave or captive free, to release from one's power, to set at liberty, to emancipate, literally to send from one's hand, i.e., control, to release from control, power of a master. All right. So, he, as it says, in 17, matter of fact, I'll go up a little bit. By 1778, Absalom had purchased his wife's freedom so that their children would be free. He asked for aid by donations and loans. According to colonial law, children took the status of their mother, so children were born to enslaved women. So children born to enslaved women were enslaved from birth. Absalom also wrote to his enslavers seeking his freedom, but was initially denied in 1784. However, Wynkoop manumitted him, or quote unquote set him free, inspired by revolutionary ideas. So, hey, Esau, freed him, quote unquote, so that he can pursue, his plan on and helping, lead Jake into further, confusion. And so it says Absalom took the surname Jones as an indication of his American heritage. So he was a tool that Esau was going to use to help, breed more confusion about our true nationality and where we came from as a people. And that's why when you hear Jake going into what he was going into, he was pushing that whole notion that we're African, and then him, adding the American part onto it too. All right, just help tie the confusion all together.
Reverend Jesse Jackson in 1888. It was Reverend Absalom Jones who created the term.
And so, like I said, is these niggas that Esau used, all right, to confuse and destroy the minds of our own people. All right, let's get this real quick. All right, this is Jeremiah. Where we at? Bear with me. Is it Jeremiah 2? Salakia. No, that's not it. Yeah, bear with me. This is not 2, it's gotta be 5. Yeah, Jeremiah chapter 5 and verse 26. It says, "From among my people are found wicked men. They lay wait as he that setteth snares. They set a trap, they catch men. As a cage is full of birds, so are their houses full of deceit. Therefore they are become great and waxen rich. They are waxen fat, they shine, yea, they overpass the deeds of the wicked. They judge not the cause of the fatherless, yet they prosper, and the right of the needy do they not judge." Right, because these jakes were pawns, being used by these devils for, for underlining plans that will eventually, set in motion, later on down the line, things of confusion that was going to be used to continue the stronghold that he had over our people. All right. So these are these Boule members, because I'm pretty sure this dude Absalom Jones, he was a member of the Black Boule. He had to be, if they was around back then. All right. But these reverends that you constantly keep hearing these guys call themselves, they weren't true biblical teachers, because if they was, they were supposed to be teaching the scriptures. But you don't hear none of these dudes bring out no Bible verses, man. You know. So just putting that out there. So let's finish this out, and I got a few more, and I'm gonna end it out.
Same goddamn agenda. Keeping them damn coloreds under control. Alright, so a quick little sidebar. Mr. Absalom Jones had already been in Philadelphia for quite some time. It's not 100% clear as to what purpose or what connection he had to this woman, but the purpose for him being there already before being manumitted was Jemima Tullochyn Jones, who used her influence with her husband, Charles Cornwallis I, to get him to allow Absalom Jones to write those sermons. Hence why that sermon that is mentioned in that newspaper article is about the trials and tribulations of Charles Cornwallis. He was very grateful to Jemima for that ability, because it was ultimately the reason why he obtained his freedom. and why he was the person that they utilized in order to indoctrinate and control other people through things like the African Society, a Free African Society, as well as the African Church, the Episcopal Church that they had. So when he was manumitted in 1784 or 3 or whatever year it was, this is the reason why he took Jemima's maiden name, which was Jones. Ain't no coincidences in history. Just a little bonus information.
You know, and this is good information because, like I said, this plays a pivotal part in what led our people into becoming, African Americans. You know, so that guy Absalom Jones was actually the first one to try to push the whole, African American label upon our people. And like I said, Jesse Jackson was the one that they used to cement it. All right, but all this being said is just further proof that the Lord, you know, has prophecy playing out the way it was supposed to because us falling away had to happen, but we're at a point in time now to where those false coverings are no longer sticking, and the Lord is waking us up out of that stronghold. All right, though you have a majority of our people that still want to cling to these titles. All right, the elect of the nation of Israel is waking up. All right, this is Isaiah chapter 30:1. It says, "Woe to the rebellious children, say of the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover what they covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin." And that's what these different names that our people are calling themselves, man. Whether it's black, FBA, Asiatic black man, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, whatever the fuck they want to call themselves. These are false coverings that are giving you leeway to commit sin and not worship Yahweh Shem Yahushua the way that we're supposed to. All right, because the whole duty of man, according to Ecclesiastes 12:13, it says to fear Yahweh Shem Yahushua and keep his commandments. Hey, for you to reject the true covering, which is our true nationality as being Hebrew Israelites, all right, you run to these other coverings, these other names, because they give leeway for you to still be able to do what you want. All right, it says that it's like that walk to go down to Egypt and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust of Egypt, it's like in your trust in the shadow of Egypt, your confusion. So if you want to continue to stay in that darkness, all right, that's going to lead to your destruction. Okay, because the truth is out here. All right, all the information, the prophecies, the historical things that we bring out to tie us, to the Bible. These things, everything is showing you that we indeed are the children of Israel. But if you people still want to deny that, that's to your own detriment at the end of the day, because the Lord is calling back his elect. All right, and as we always say, that this truth is not for all Israel. He's only using the prophets to wake up the elect. All right, the Israel of the Most High, because according to the scriptures, not all Israel is of Israel. The Lord is only dealing with the Israel of the Most High, which is the elect, the remnant, the ones that the Lord is seeing as truly seeking him out. All right, in these last days. All right, this is Hosea 5:15. It says, "I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction they will seek me early." All right, and that's what's going on, man. All right, as the elect of Israel is seeking the Lord in truth and sincerity, because according to John the 4th chapter, it talks about how that we're in a time to where the true believers are going to stand upon their feet and seek the Lord, because that's something these Edomites knew. All right, I have this quote that I bring out from time to time. I believe it's from John Adams. Let me pull that up real quick. That's not it. Let me see. Damn, give me a second. Slack you. That's crazy. Bear with me. I'm gonna find this joint. But I'm positive it was John Adams that said that. Let me look at my phone. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to get that. Because we're in a point in time to where the true worshipers are standing upon their feet, and that the true worshipers is talking about the elect, because we have shed, all right, all the false pseudonyms that was placed upon us to keep us separated from our power, all right, and now that we are certain of who we are and who our true power is, man, and these devils are in great fear because they understand that the prophecy that's written of their destruction, all right, is coming to pass as we speak. You know, if I can't find it, it's all good. I'll try to post it on the comment board, but so many pictures in here. Here we go. It was Isaac Newton, Salakia. So it says, about the time of the end, a body of men will be raised up who will turn their attention to the prophecies and insist on their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition. Right, and those are the men and women that are shedding, all right, these false identities are coming back to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua in spirit and truth, which is why I'm going to just go ahead and grab that scripture I quoted. John 4:22, it says, ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And that's the time that we're in. And that's why you're seeing, Jake, beginning to shed those lies that has been given unto us as a people. All right, this fake, history and things that they've created to keep us in this this vacuum. All right, the Lord has broke those chains, man. All right, so this is Baruch 2:28. It says, and as thou spakest by the prophet Moses, or by the servant Moses, in the day when thou didst command him to write the law before the children of Israel, if ye will not hear my voice, surely this very great multitude shall be turned into a small number among the nations where I will scatter thee. And this is going into the remnant that the Lord has preserved, unto himself. All right, because we know that Israel is at the sand of the sea. It's going to be more Israelites, all right, that's going to reject this truth than that's going to receive it. All right, which is why you have scriptures like Zechariah 13:8 and 9 going into how 2/3 are going to be destroyed and the 1/3, which is the remnant, will be saved. It says, for I knew that they will not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people. But in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves. And that's what's happening. All right. The Lord has stirred our spirit. Okay. He's opened our eyes. All right. He has, allowed the day star, which is Yahweh Shai, to arise in our hearts. And now we know the truth. All right. And like it says in John 8:32, that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. We have been, freed from those mental and spiritual, bonds that they put upon us. Okay, it says, and shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua their power, for I will give them an heart and ears to hear, and they shall praise me in the land of their captivity, and think upon my name. And that's the great awakening that you see happen. Okay, Israel is waking up, and those people portraying themselves as, Israelites, which really they call themselves Israelis. And when you go into, the definition of that word Israeli, all right, it's a whole different persona than the ancient Israelites. Okay, because when you go into Israeli, it says in the Edamon Online, it says it distinguishes the citizens from the modern state from the ancient people who had been known in English since 14th from the 14th century. So those people over there in the land of Israel today, they are not the true Israelites. All right, and that's why I said, man, we're in a time of the awakening to where the elect is coming upon their feet, and these devils are afraid because that law that they have been, running with, is now, being broken. All right, and their great fear, according to Revelation 11, is falling upon them. All right, so finishing it out, and return from their stiff neck and from their wicked deeds, for they shall remember the way of their fathers which sinned before the Lord. And we understand what led us to be in this position where we fell away as a people was because of our disobedience. All right, so when we read, scriptures like Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, that perfectly describes why our people are in the position that we're in, why we go through the different things, and why we suffer from the curses that's described in that chapter, because we disobeyed the Lord. We sinned against the power. We broke the covenant that we made with our power, and now we're suffering, all right, the punishment for it. But our punishment is coming to an end, all right. So we don't have much longer, all right, before our Redeemer, which is Yahweh Shai, is gonna come in and take us out this place, man. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. All right, I'm gonna close it out right here. So, I pray this lesson was edifying. So, with that, I want to give all honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachah Wadash. Double honor to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone that taught me the truth and that rule well. And peace and salutation to the elect. Until next time, I say Shalom.